Slash and burn areas, grows, fish saunas and cattle houses. In this presentation, you will be giving a background to the Finnish semi-natural grasslands. At the front page here you can see some keywords, they are all in Finnish. It's for those who want to look for more information. Finns have been practicing for a very long time on old type of living. It was closely related to the slash and burn method, where forest was burned down and it was cultivated then in the ashes on that area for a few years. When they became permanent settled, they kept on having these slash and burns far away from the village, and it was combined with the wintertime living in a permanent settlement in a village to then in summertime been moving out and away from the village. Not all people were moving out, so it was divided, young men, young women, or very dependent on them what kind of farm it was, who went to these out far away areas from the farm. So this utilization of these areas outside the village was a combination of several systems. It was both fishing, grazing, to prepare and burn and cultivate slash and burn. It was to collect fodder, it was berry picking, and it was hunting. And of course they had some of the animals with them as well. The first building to build alongside a lake was usually a summer kitchen. It was looking like the very traditional tipi that the Indians in America have, or for example Same people used to live in before. After that they also built a smoke sauna, so a wooden log hut, and later on a summer cow stable to keep the cattle during the night. There may have been a fence for animals nighttime or just a fire. So many places there was no fences, they just kept a fire burning the whole night. This inner area next to the place to take the water, that may have been a lake, it may have been a stream, it may have been a well, and then these houses and the fire in the middle, it was called a field. The Finnish word kenttä. The lake was nearby for fishing, and in the lake there should be an island where they could keep grazing the animals in a safe environment. For example, goats or sheep could be taken out to this island and stay there. No predators would then harm them on the lake island. They were doing fodder for animals for the winter here. They were cutting grass, both on former cultivated slash and burn areas, or it could be bogs, or there may be some meadows, open meadows, or these river or lake sides where was growing naturally grasses that they cut. And then in the forest they were cutting down leaves and tying up them into bundles and store them for also fodder for the animals. They were cultivating or pasturing an old slash and burn area. So slash and burn was not, it was cultivated some few years, not just one time. And they were preparing and burning new slash and burn areas as well. There were meadows, forest pastures, and grazed bogs. So the animals they had with them, they could have grazing on these different biotopes. Besides this, they also did hunt, and later in the autumn berry picking in these areas. There were repeating seasonal systems, and we could divide them into these following 5 types. There was slash and burn, there were groves, summer farms, fish saunas, forest pastures, meadows and bogs. And usually many of them were at the same place. Not all, for example. Some fish saunas were far out in the archipelago, and there perhaps was not then built any smoke houses at all. Slash and burn was mostly made in the spring and start of summer, so it was burned at that time, in the start of summer. And there could be some animals together at this place with them. Then the grows, it's not a good translation directly into English now, because the Finnish word is salot, and it means very fertile, perhaps humus-rich soil with a lot of leaf trees. So they spent summertime there, and they had animals with them, cattle, goats, and most likely a dog also. Then the summer farms, which are very similar to the groves. There they had larger activities and more buildings. The fish saunas, it was usually the spring fish in the late winter, early spring, and then it was the autumn fishing later on in the autumn. And forest pastures, meadows and bogs were also utilized during the summertime, and they had then both horses and cattle and dogs could be with them in those places. So no really pure places, or some places it could be one of these types. In many places it was combined. Confusing, yes, several names and diffuse borders. The common factor of the slash and burn, the summer farms, the groves, the fish saunas, the forest pastures, bogs and meadows are their role of utilizing the nature of the forest. For a long time, Finland maintained old systems of utilization natural resources, and the old-fashioned character was preserved. Large local differences were also found. In densely populated Western Finland, the structure changed earlier. There also ran out of common natural resources earlier, and new land use methods and machines were introduced earlier. Transporting animals to the islands was common both in the archipelago and in inland Lake Finland. The use of the island's natural resources has decreased sharply to the extent that agriculture has become industrialized. On the island, the risk of predators was lower. Slash and burn. In the slash and burn, new areas were taken to be burned regularly from the forest. They usually lived in the same place for 10 to 12 years and then moved on to a new area before they got permanently settled. Slash and burn were made in areas where there were good hunting grounds and good fishing waters. There was also a lot of fishing in connection with the slash and burn activities. Temporary residential buildings and saunas were built on the slash and burn land, which then also were used as a barn. Many of them later on turned into permanent residence. The slash and burn areas were usually far from a permanent place of residence in the beginning, and the harvest was often brought home only in the winter. In the winter, because they could go by horses and sledges in the winter to fetch home the hay and the leaves. Areas for burning were chosen carefully. The area had to be able to be used for as long as possible. The slash and burn was made both in large common burnings, so with several families together or the whole village, but also in family burnings, so one family slash and burn areas. If you try to look in a map after words including kaski, it's svedja in Swedish, and palo or bränna, you will find a huge amount of them all over Finland. They could not even fit here in the map. First, it's carefully chosen the area, and the wood is cut down, and you have to put it in a certain way when you cut it down so that it will be effectively burned afterwards. You can see a forest area that is ready to be burned. It usually has to dry from 1 to 3 years, depending on how big the trees are that have been cut down. The fire is being started. This is a demonstration here. As you can see, there is smoke behind already. So what they are actually doing here, they have gathered those materials that didn't burn in the first run, and they are lighting up a new fire to burn this down. Smoke is rising from the soil when it has been burned. Afterward, it has to be cleaned. It means all not burned materials will be either burned separately or they will be carried to the edge of the area and made kind of a fence out of them. Mainly rye, but also other things were cultivated in the slash and burn. And you can see here now this first yield coming, that there are these cut down trees are standing up here everywhere in the field. We carried out a small area slash and burn in Mustiala in 2005, and we did a small burning also the year after that, and in the area we cultivated then some slash and burn rye and turnips. At the Tilkämäki National Park and in Koli, they have usually also been regularly burning these slash and burn areas and cultivating rye afterwards. It's still going on. Summer farms or summer stables or field stables called. Smeds and Pekala have been studying these areas in Finland, and in Suurkalajoki area they have their roots in the Middle Ages. In southern Ostrobothnia they are mentioned already in the 16th century, and then in parts of Ostrobothnia and the Ladoga region in the 17th century. In the 19th and 20th century, the most economically important summer farms developed in central Ostrobothnia and southern Ostrobothnia. 200 summer farms were mapped in Haapavesi. There have also been many summer farms in Vihanni, Haapajärvi and Oulainen. It is assumed that the high-level dairy farming was an important influencing factor behind the development of summer farms. Summer farms were also in the mountains of Norway and the highlands of Sweden, and on this map you can see where they were highly common and slightly less common. And Finland have not been mapped that thoroughly, but there are now like different maps. There is this source to the left, and then there is a map also to the right of these areas where they have been. And I just quickly tried also to look at what nowadays the map is coming up if you put the words for summer farms there, and found only a very few localities. None of these are in function anymore. It is believed that this whole phenomenon with summer farms came from northern Sweden because there were people moving into Finland from there. And the Torneolaakso River Valley summer farms survived the longest until 1959. And the possible reason for that was that they were disturbed a lot from different parties. There were the Varyaks and the people from Russia, Novgorodians, that have during centuries been coming in and robbing. Also the Karelians approached these areas, and also the Norwegians. Yeah, Russians were mentioned, and Germans as well took their turns destroying roads and settlements in the region. If then the people had some cattle and people at the summer farms, then the danger was lower, because they always had then some seeds, seed grains and living houses at the summer farm if the permanent living place was destroyed, and it was then like better conditions to start over again. In northern Karelia and northern Savo, there were also some similar to summer houses, these salos in the mountains, and their location was dependent always on the water, so was water available. And the animal husbandry developed into the main production direction here in the 19th century, and butter was an important commodity. And cattle grazing then in these distant fields and forest pastures, they promoted summer milk production. There was also summer farms in connection with Ladoga, Sortavala and Käkisalmi. So those who had their houses in Vuoksi, close to the lakes, and also these southern mountains of North Karelian area belonged to this area. And there was then this big great partition. It's like a law that came from the Swedish Empire, that you have to make the villages smaller, and people have to move out of the village because the villages was becoming too big and there was too little land for everybody in the villages. And at that point then a lot of these summer farms were developing, and some of them also then developed into new permanent residents. And they were usually these summer farms in this region about 20 kilometers from the home, the permanent residence. Haapavesi summer farmhouse, Rapin Karjamaja, and this one was then established as there was this large export of butter to Oulu. So there was this great demand. Malahti Summer Farm is one of the more well-known places. Here you can see some pictures from the original place and also indoors how it did look, and afterwards when it was moved to the open air museum at Seurasaari in Helsinki. Farm at Närpio, it's in Ostrobotnia. Kauliranta Summer Farm, it's up in northern part of Finland. And a summer farm in Yli-Härmä in Ostrobotnia. Bark, milk-related utensils. The dishes used in the dairy farm were of different shapes and materials. Birch bark, singlewood, board or clay dishes. In the old days it was used a lot of birch bark vessels. There were strainers, kettlers, bottle-making pots and drink containers. They survived for a long time in dairy farming because during the summer the cattle were taken to the village, to the groves for grazing pastures. There was plenty of raw materials to make the utensils with. It was unnecessary to transport heavy wooden equipment there. To the left you can see a milk bowl, and to the right you can see a birch bark strainer from Pieksämäki. When used, it was filled with fine juniper or spruce needles. The needles gave the milk a fresh taste, and it could even be felt in the butter. Grows and summer cattle stables. Hay was usually made first on the outer meadows and then from home meadows. Preparations for making hay especially gave the housewives a lot of care and work. There had to be a variety and plenty of food. You had to be prepared beer, churn butter, make cheese, bake bread and wash the clothes, because during haymaking time everyone had to appear in clean clothes. It was customary in a large part of Finland, especially in the western parts, to dress in a half church-like clothing in the meadow. The cows were on the pastures also in these outer far-away meadows. On the map you can see the place named called Salo. They are also that many that they cannot fit on the map. A woman taking care of her cattle at a grow in 1920s and 30s. And here we have one cow stable in northern parts of Finland again, in Ylitornio, Meltosjärvi, and you can see the cattle stable here, and there is also a fence, and the cattle breed here is native, and this photo was taken in 1957. Stable and the word field. In northern Osterbothnia, summer cow stables is 5 kilometers from the village at the top of a mountain. 3 farms keep their houses and cow stable here during the summer. Saarimaa, also in Ylitornio, and a summer field with the cow stable and the living house, the cattle hut, milk hut and barley drying construction. All of this together is called a field. Pay attention to that the cattle stable looks pretty much like these traditional tents, the tents that the Indians and the Same people were building. They were more steep and high before, and this is a kind of development from that into this kind of construction for the cattle. In the middle you can see the living houses, to the right the small milk house where milk were treated, and then you have the cow stable to the left. There are also wooden sticks here in the middle, also a format of kind of a tent, and here was food cooked for cattle. So it was common to make warm food for animals in old days. And again, these similar kinds of cattle construction from Tornio River Valley. Pay notice to that there is no windows in here, and when the door was closed, insects, there is a lot of mosquitoes, they try to go out via the ventilation tower in the middle because they can see the light there, and they are flying towards the light and then getting out of the animal shed, and the animals can then stay safely with no mosquitoes inside. And here a photo of how it could look indoors in such a cattle shed. Here you can see that the floors are of wood, and then there are small boxes, one for each cattle. It could also be much more simple, with no boxes for the cattle at all. They are just next to each other, and they may have been tied up to the wall, and this is pretty much how it looked like also in Swedish and in Norwegian summer farms. Taking care of the milk, it was most commonly done outdoors, like in this picture. Much later on then, it was developed these small milk houses where they could take care of the milk. But here you can see that all the utensils they have for keeping the milk, making the butter, everything is washed here. There is hot water in the black pot here. It has been they have been cooking hot water here, and they are then using hot water here to clean up these. And before they used also juniper tree to put in this hot water to cook it there, because then kind of sterilize the milk when you wash the milk kettles here, then they get kind of sterilized, and this is still used in Norway in some places, so it has been totally accepted method of cleaning your buckets with this juniper. Fish saunas and summer huts. So fish saunas were far away from the permanent settlement. In some parts of Finland, people went there early in the spring and winter when the ice was still there, and sometimes goats were also taken along. When the spring fishing was done, the preparation of a slash and burn area began, and there were fish saunas both in outer archipelago and in the inland wilderness. Nowadays, a lot of old fish saunas are used in connection with the maintenance of water rights and in managing water bodies. Presentation is a description from 1912 where old people have been telling how they were doing when they went to the fish saunas. And this you can independently read afterwards by opening up the presentation. Fishing and hunting was as important as anything else. This is a photo of men doing together fishing at Montis Apaja. Hietaniemi fishing sauna, Hailuoto. It's on the western coast, but up in northern parts of Finland, close to Oulu. Fishing saunas, you can see many of them here, even if the picture is very dark, and it's on the lake shore, and this area is nowadays it's Karelia, and nowadays it's in Russia. Saunas at Lake Ladoga, it's also in Russia nowadays. And many good fishing places, the whole of the village, each of them had in the same location their own fishing sauna or fishing hut to say. So all men from one village went up there and spent their time there in fishing when it was the right time for fishing. Men making reparations on fishing net. Fishing sauna at Pielinen. Fishing sauna in the outer archipelago, Merikarvia. And the same building a little bit more close up. The system with small houses or fishing saunas called in places far away from your permanent residence. It's also used in Siberia. This one from Vach, Oxtyurye. And here again, fishing saunas also from Siberia. Nowadays, they are not used that much anymore for smoking fish, but they may be used for recreational purposes or also connecting with still fishing. So the word fishing sauna, it was, of course, they were drying fish and smoking fish. So when they had been fishing, they needed to treat the fish in order to get it preserved. Sauna in Perimeri National Park is being renovated. Very shortly, a few words about the forest, pastures, bogs and meadows. From the picture you can see that they took also the cattle out in the bogs to graze. It was very common that the villages had several of areas that they used outside their villages. Here is one example from southeastern parts of Finland, Norby Laptresk, and this village had an area from 1 to 7 kilometers from the villages that they were using. There were riverside meadows, there were slash and burn areas, there were areas where they were cutting hay, there were areas where they were keeping the pigs on the pastures, and areas for the horses on the pastures, and also of course for cattle and sheep. And there were even some of the areas where they have been, in very long time ago, they have been collecting this plant Trapa natans, which had very nice seeds that they collected. And on the map you can see a meadow area that is located about 3 kilometers from the main residence in the village. And here is a river, stream, small stream in the middle, and on both sides there was then this green meadow area here where they were moving hay for winter storage. And alongside the road here there was also these old barns, so the storage in barns, the hay out here away from the village. And later on winter they were transporting the hay then back to their permanent residence where they kept the animals in the winter time. And there are two different mentions from this village. One is that the shepherds stayed from Monday morning to Saturday evening out in these outer areas with the cattle, grazing them there, and only were home once a week on Sundays during the summer times. And another one, and this is from a later time, from 1950s or late 1940s, where a mother was, or a grandmother, she was, the cattle were kept up in these outer far pasture areas, and she was doing work daytime at home at the farm, and then she was driving by horse out to these outer pastures where the cattle was. She milked them in the evening. She was sleeping there during the night, and in the morning she was milking the cattle, and then she took the milk on the horse wagon and went down to the permanent residence where she was then treating the milk into, to become butter or whatever they used it for, cheese. And then again in the evening she went back up and spent the night with the cattle in the forest. The forested, wooded and wooded biotopes are forest pastures, forest meadows, slash and burn forests, and wooden pastures.